"Get in the carriage," Prince said after seeing the widow and her children freezing in the snowstorm. "Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from." Snow had a way of making sound vanish. The wind howled across the open fields, yet around Margaret Collins everything seemed muffled, as if the world had been wrapped in cotton. Her boots sank into the drift with each step. The snow reached almost to her knees now, heavy and stubborn. Her skirts were soaked. The hem had frozen into a stiff, jagged edge that struck her ankles with every movement. "Stay close to me," she said, glancing back. Thomas trudged behind her, his small jaw clenched in determination. He was 8, trying hard to be older. He held his sister's hand so tightly that Eliza whimpered, but did not let go. The little girl's cheeks were red with cold. Her dark curls stuck with ice crystals beneath a frayed bonnet. "I am tired, Mama," Eliza whispered. "I know, darling." Margaret forced her voice to be calm. "We shall reach the next village soon. There will be a fire and warm bread and a bed with real blankets. You will see." She was lying. She had no certain village, no sure bed, no coin left in her pocket. But she had to keep them moving. If they stopped, the cold would creep into their bones. She could not allow that. Her breath came out in ragged clouds. Once, when she lifted her head, she saw that the road was little more than 2 lines pressed into a white world. The fields on either side had vanished beneath the storm. The sky was a grey curtain without shape. Thomas coughed, a dry, stubborn cough. Margaret stopped long enough to tuck his scarf higher over his nose. "It is not so bad, Mama," he said, trying to sound brave. "I am a soldier. Soldiers do not mind snow." "Then you are the bravest soldier in the north of England," she answered. "But even a soldier must not let his sister fall asleep." Eliza leaned against her, her legs trembling. "I am not asleep," the girl protested weakly. Margaret bent down and lifted her. Eliza was light, almost too light. Margaret's arms shook with the effort, but she shifted her daughter against her chest and began walking again. The wind struck her full in the face. Snow stung her skin. Her eyes watered and blurred. She could no longer feel her own fingers, only the weight of the child and the pull of Thomas's hand on her skirt. "Keep hold of me, Thomas," she called. "Do not let go, no matter what." "I will not," he answered at once. For a brief moment, memory intruded. A different winter, a different road, but no snow. Her husband had walked beside her then, laughing at something Thomas had said. He had carried Eliza on his shoulders. There had been coins in his pocket and hope in his eyes. He is gone, she thought. Gone, and with him the house, the name, the little security they had possessed. The memory made her stumble. Her knees almost buckled. She knew she was close to her limit. Every part of her ached. A dull, heavy weariness pressed at her from within, tempting her to sink down into the snow and close her eyes. "No," she told herself fiercely, "not while they still breathe." She forced herself to concentrate on the road ahead. At first, she saw nothing. Then something dark moved in the whiteness. A shape, long and uncertain, approaching with a kind of slow, steady rhythm. "Horses," Thomas whispered. "Mama, do you see?" Horses. Her heart gave a strange leap. A carriage, perhaps. People. Shelter. Or another danger. She hesitated. The instinct to seek help fought with another instinct, just as strong. The instinct to avoid the gaze of those who could judge her, question her, send her away. The shape grew clearer. It was indeed a carriage, large and dark, drawn by 4 horses whose heads were bent against the wind. The coachman was hunched on the box, the reins held in gloved hands. Snow clung to the wheels. 2 riders rode beside it, cloaks whipped by the gale. Margaret drew the children closer to the side of the road, though the ditch was barely visible. She tried to straighten her posture, to gather a little dignity around herself like a cloak. The horses saw her before the men did. They tossed their heads, snorting, hooves striking spray from the snow. The coachman shouted, pulling hard on the reins. The carriage rocked and slowed, then came to a halt a few yards away. One of the riders turned in the saddle, peering through the storm. "There's someone on the road," he called. "A woman with children." The coach door opened. A man stepped down, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark coat dusted with snow. He wore no hat now. He had removed it in haste. His hair was damp and curled slightly at the edges. Margaret saw at once that he was not an ordinary gentleman. Even through her half-frozen confusion, she could see it in his bearing, in the cut of his coat, in the way the others turned toward him. He strode through the snow without hesitation. "Madam," he said, his voice pitched to carry above the wind, "you will be frozen alive. What are you doing upon this road in such weather?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her lips were numb. She swallowed and tried again. "We are traveling south, sir," she managed, "to the next town. It is not so far." He looked past her, along the empty white road. "In this storm, it may as well be the other side of Scotland," he said sharply. Then his gaze returned to her and softened. "You are at the end of your strength. You can hardly stand." She stiffened at that. Pride flared, one last small coal of warmth. "I can manage," she said. "We do not wish to trouble you." The man's eyes moved to the children. Thomas stared back, his blue lips pressed tightly together. Eliza hid her face against Margaret's neck. "It is no trouble," the stranger replied. "It is necessary." One of the riders urged his horse closer. "Your Highness," he said low, "the road is nearly impassable as it is. If we delay—" The man lifted one hand, and the rider fell silent. "Get in the carriage," he said to Margaret. She stared at him. "Sir, He stepped closer. There was authority in him, yes, but also urgency. "Madam, this is not a request," he said. "The children are clearly unwell. Their hands are purple with cold. You will come into the carriage, and we shall take you to shelter." His gaze held hers. She understood then why the rider had called him Your Highness. She saw it in the lines of his face, neither old nor very young, in the set of his mouth, in the certainty that infused his words. "A prince," she thought faintly. God help us. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her that accepting such help would put her under an obligation she could never repay. She imagined entering some grand house under the eyes of servants and ladies, her worn dress and patched cloak a visible stain upon their polished world. No, better the snow than their charity. Then Eliza shivered in her arms, a small, involuntary spasm that shook her from head to foot. The child's teeth chattered. She let out a small whimper and fell quiet. Too quiet. Margaret's decision broke in an instant. "Thomas," she said hoarsely, "take his hand." The prince did not wait for that. He reached for Thomas himself, not with impatience, but with a firm, steady grip. "Come, my lad," he said. "You shall tell me your name when you are warm." Thomas blinked up at him, surprised. "I am Thomas Collins, sir," he said. "Thomas Collins," the man repeated. "Very good. And your sister?" "Eliza," Thomas answered. "She is only 5. Then let us see what we can do for Eliza." He turned, leading Thomas by the hand, and gestured to Margaret to follow. "Careful," he said quietly as they approached the carriage. "The step is high, and your legs are tired." She did not protest. She climbed after him, holding Eliza close. Inside the carriage, the air felt almost hot. Cushions lined the seats. A fur rug lay folded in one corner. The prince, there was no doubt he was a prince now, not to any of them, took the rug and spread it over the children. "Sit there," he directed. "Lean back." That is it. Margaret sank onto the opposite seat, her body shaking now that it could finally do so. The children pressed against her, their small forms gradually losing that dreadful rigidity of cold. "Your Highness," said the rider from the doorway, "we must move if we are to reach Windermere by nightfall." "Windermere," Margaret repeated without meaning to. The prince slid back onto the seat beside Thomas. "Windermere Castle is not far," he said to her. "It is the only place sensible enough to offer shelter in such weather. You will be safe there." Safe, she thought. In a castle, with a prince. Her fingers tightened on Eliza's shoulder. "We cannot remain," she said quietly. "We are only passing through. Once the storm has passed, we can continue." "We shall speak of continuing later," he replied. "For now we must ensure that you and your children are not taken from this road in a frozen state tomorrow morning." He leaned forward and rapped on the roof. "Drive on," he called, "at a careful pace, no heroics." The door shut. The carriage lurched, then began to move. The wheels crunched through the snow. Outside the storm roared, but inside it was strangely contained, like the sound of distant waves. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Margaret's mind swam. Fatigue pressed down upon her eyelids. She struggled against it. "Do not sleep yet," the prince said in a low voice. "Your body has been too cold for too long. Staying awake a little while longer will be safer. She looked up, startled. I am well enough, Your Highness. You are not, he answered simply. But you will be. Thomas watched him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Are you truly a prince? He blurted. Margaret hissed softly. Thomas, it is quite all right, the prince said. He turned to the boy. Yes, I am. My name is Edward Hawthorne. I am on my way to my family's estate at Windermere for the season. Thomas nodded solemnly, as though this confirmed some private theory. I have never met a prince, he said. Have you met many other sorts of men? Edward asked with a faint smile. Thomas considered. I met a butcher once, he said. And our vicar. And the man who came for the furniture. Margaret flinched. Edward noticed the movement but did not press. I see, he said gently. Well, now you may say you have met a prince who unfortunately is not nearly as useful as a butcher. Thomas frowned. Butchers have knives, he said. Princes have carriages in snow. Edward gave a soft, surprised laugh. Margaret stared at him. She had not expected him to laugh like that, almost like an ordinary man. Then I shall accept that description with humility, he said. Eliza stirred against Margaret's chest and lifted her head a little. Her eyes, large and dark, moved to the stranger. Are you a king? She asked sleepily. Not yet, Edward replied, and if I am fortunate, not for a long time. Do kings have mothers? She persisted. Yes, he said, they do. Then you must listen to yours, Eliza murmured. This time his laugh had a hint of ruefulness. I have been told that my entire life, he said, and yet it seems I still managed to displease her. Margaret found her voice at last. Your Highness, she said, you are very kind, but I do not wish to cause any offence. If your family, if the ladies of the castle, find our presence inconvenient, we shall go as soon as we are able. He turned to her. The playful light in his eyes faded, leaving a steady seriousness. Madam, he said, I will not allow you to be turned back into a snowstorm for the sake of anyone's convenience, not even my mother's. She lowered her gaze. You do not know who we are, she said. That can be remedied, he replied. What is your name? Margaret Collins, she said quietly. This is my son, Thomas. My daughter, Eliza. Mrs. Collins, he said, are you travelling to family? She hesitated. How much should she say? How much could she say? No, she answered at last. We have no family in the north. I had hoped to find a position in a town some miles from here. A distant acquaintance had written of the possibility of work. But we were delayed and the last of our money has gone. And your husband? He asked with more gentleness than curiosity. She felt her throat tighten. He died last year, she said. I am sorry, he replied. There was a pause. The carriage rocked gently. And before that, he added, I take it your circumstances were not exactly as they are now. She stiffened. No, Your Highness. The man who took the furniture, Thomas said suddenly, looking at his mother. He took Papa's desk. Thomas, Margaret murmured. That is enough. Edward's expression softened. He must have been a very important man, your father, to have a desk, he said. Thomas shook his head. He was not important, he said. Not to them. They said he had done something wrong, but Mama said... Thomas, Margaret interrupted sharply. Her son blushed and fell silent. Edward looked from one to the other. His brows drew together. I see that your story is more complicated than a simple journey in a snowstorm, he said. She lifted her chin a little. Everyone's story is complicated, Your Highness, she said, but not all stories deserve to be told at a prince's table. If you will allow us to leave when the weather gentles, that is all I ask. And if I ask for more, he said quietly. She frowned. More? More of the story, he replied. Not at the prince's table, perhaps. Only here as Edward Hawthorne, a man who saw a woman and 2 children nearly frozen on a road and wishes to understand how such a thing came to be. Margaret swallowed hard. I do not wish to seem ungrateful, she said. You have saved us from... She broke off. But there are things that were spoken of in courts and offices and in whispers in the street. I have no wish to hear them repeated in a castle as amusement. His gaze sharpened. Is that what happened? He asked. Your husband's death, your loss of position, were they the subject of amusement? She looked out the small window. Snow rushed past, a blur of white. Not to me, she said. Nor should they have been to anyone, he answered. Silence fell again. Yet it did not feel quite as heavy as before. The warmth of the carriage slowly reached into her hands, her feet. She uncurled her toes inside her boots and felt the prickling pain of returning sensation. "How far is Windermere, Your Highness?" she asked after a while. "An hour, perhaps a little more at this pace," he said. "We travel more slowly for the horses' sake." "They must be fine horses," Thomas said. "Ours never went so fast." "You had horses?" Edward asked. "We had one," Thomas said proudly. "Before. His name was Jasper. He was old, but he could still trot. I used to feed him apples." Margaret pressed her lips together. She remembered Jasper's gentle head bent over Thomas's shoulder, the boy's laughter. Selling the horse had been one of the last humiliations. Edward heard the silence and did not press. "I regret that we have no apples in this carriage," he said lightly, "but I believe the kitchen at Windermere might produce some when we arrive." "Truly," Eliza whispered. "I would not dare lie to a lady," he replied. As the minutes passed, the steady movement of the carriage soothed them. Eliza's head drooped against Margaret's side. Thomas's eyes struggled to remain open. He was determined to stay awake in the presence of a prince, but the warmth and the exhaustion were stronger. "You may let them sleep now," Edward said softly. "The danger has passed." Margaret nodded. She watched her children's faces relax. For the first time in many months, they slept without fear of being roused to move on, to hurry, to hide. She felt an ache in her chest that was almost as sharp as the cold had been. It was made of relief and something like grief. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Whatever comes after this, thank you for this hour." "You need not speak of owing me anything," he replied. "If there is a debt, it is society's for allowing you to reach such a state." She almost smiled. "Society does not pay its debts, Your Highness," she whispered. "Then perhaps I must begin the fashion," he said. Time passed. The light outside dimmed. The storm eased a little, the wind losing some of its vicious edge. When Margaret looked out again, she saw the faint shapes of trees, the suggestion of a road that was more travelled, the shadow of hills in the distance. At last, she saw lights. Not the scattered, humble lights of a village, but clusters of lamps in ordered lines. They shone against walls and reflected off snow-covered stone. The outline of a great house emerged from the twilight, its windows glowing golden. Her breath caught. "That is Windermere Castle?" she asked. "Yes," Edward said. "Do not be alarmed. The walls are less unfriendly than they appear at first glance." The carriage slowed, then passed under an arch. Voices called to one another. Dogs barked. The wheels rolled onto a cleared courtyard. The door opened. Cold air rushed in again, but it felt less threatening now, edged with the scent of smoke and cooked food. A footman lowered the steps. Another man in fine livery waited at the bottom, bowing as Edward stepped out. "Your Highness," he said, "we were not expecting you until tomorrow. The weather was worse than anticipated," Edward replied, "and we found travellers upon the road. Mrs. Collins, if you will give me your hand." Margaret gathered the sleeping Eliza into her arms and took his offered hand with her free one. She stepped down, the courtyard spinning around her for a moment with the sudden change. Thomas followed, blinking in the lamplight. Servants stood near the entrance, some with lanterns, some with folded cloths. Their eyes widened as they saw the state of the new arrivals, the shabby cloak, the children's thin garments, the prince's hand steadying the stranger. The man who had bowed first straightened. He was older, with a lined face and a manner that suggested long service. "Your Highness," he said again, more cautiously, "shall I have rooms prepared in the east wing for Mrs. Collins and her children?" "Yes," Edward said at once. "They will require hot water, linen, and a good fire. See that they are lodged comfortably." There was the smallest pause, barely more than a breath, but Margaret felt it. She saw the fleeting flicker of surprise in the man's eyes. "As you wish, sir," he said. A younger servant, standing a little behind, leaned toward him. Margaret could not hear the first part of his whisper, only the last words as she and the children passed. She heard the man murmur almost under his breath that bringing a stranger into Windermere would surely cause trouble. Margaret pretended she had not heard. The words followed her across the courtyard anyway, clinging like snow to her skirts. Trouble. Of course she would bring trouble. She held Eliza tighter and kept her eyes fixed on the wide doors of the castle. Inside, the air wrapped around her like a sudden embrace. Heat, light, and the faint scent of wax and roasting meat filled the hall. Her head swam with the change, the great space, the high ceiling, the polished stone. They blurred together. "Mrs. Collins," the older servant said, stepping closer, "if you will come this way." His tone was carefully respectful. Not warm, not cold. Measured. Margaret nodded. "Thank you." Thomas's hand caught her sleeve. "Mamma," he whispered, "it is enormous." "Hush," she murmured back. "Mind your step." They followed the steward along a corridor lined with portraits. The painted eyes of long-dead men and women looked down on them. Margaret kept her gaze on the floor. Her boots left damp prints behind her. "You will forgive the haste," the steward said. "We were not expecting, that is, the castle was not told of additional guests. We shall make you comfortable." "There is no need," Margaret began. He stopped at a door in a quieter passage and opened it. "There is every need, madam," he said. "His Highness has given his instructions." The room beyond was modest compared to the hall, but to Margaret it might as well have been a palace. There was a small fireplace with a crackling fire, a bed with thick quilts, a narrow truckle bed beside it, a washstand, a chair, everything clean. A maid stood waiting inside, her hands folded. She was young, with a round, kind face. "This is Bess," the steward said. "She will assist you. If you require anything, you may ring the bell there." Margaret looked at the bell pull as if it were some exotic device. "Thank you," she said again. The steward inclined his head. "I am Mr. Atkins, the house steward," he added. "Welcome to Windermere, Mrs. Collins." Welcome. The word sounded strange. When he had gone, Bess stepped forward. "Let me take the little one, ma'am," she said softly. "Your arms must be aching." Margaret hesitated, then let Eliza be lifted from her. The child murmured but did not wake. "We shall put her in the big bed for now," Bess said. "You too, once you are undressed. I'll bring hot water at once. Cook will have broth and bread sent up." Thomas hovered by the door, torn between curiosity and uncertainty. "You may come in, young sir," Bess told him with a smile. "We won't bite. Are you hungry?" Thomas nodded, then tried to straighten his shoulders. "I could eat a little," he said. "A little," Bess echoed. "Good, because that is what we have in this castle. Only a little." Margaret felt a sudden, unexpected laugh rise in her throat. She swallowed it quickly. "You are very kind," she said. "I do not know how to thank you." "No need for that," Bess replied. She looked her over, quick and efficient. "We'll have you warm in no time. Those clothes will have to be dried. I'll find something for you to wear in the meanwhile. One of the older gowns from a guest chest, perhaps. You're not so different in size from Lady—" She broke off, cheeks flushing. "Never mind," she said. "We shall see." By the time the water came, Margaret's hands were shaking not from cold, but from the shock of being treated with care. Bess undid her laces and clucked softly when she saw the bruised red marks on her skin, where the stays had dug in during the journey. "You've had a hard road," Bess murmured. "Well, it's over now, at least for tonight." Margaret sank into the bath as if it were some forbidden luxury. The heat stung her skin. She bit her lip to keep from groaning aloud. "Try not to fall asleep in there, ma'am," Bess advised. "You're safe, but drowning in the tub would be a foolish end after all you've weathered." "I shall stay awake," Margaret promised. She did, but only just. When she finally lay down, with Eliza curled on one side and Thomas on a pallet at the foot of the bed, sleep came in a rush. For the first time in months she did not wake 3 times before dawn, listening for footsteps or the sound of a landlord's angry voice. Morning arrived in light and warmth. Margaret woke to the crackle of fresh logs in the grate and the clink of china. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then she saw the carved bedpost, the unfamiliar coverlet, the neat pile of folded clothes on the chair. Bess set a tray on the small table. "Good morning, ma'am," she said. "Breakfast." "Breakfast?" The word felt almost shocking. "Aye." Bess lifted the cloth. "Bread, butter, honey, porridge, and tea. His Highness said you were to be given something proper, not just a scrap of crust." Margaret pushed herself up, embarrassed to be served in bed. "I can rise," she said. "I am well enough to sit at a table. I should not receive such attention." Bess shrugged. "That's between you and the prince, ma'am. I only carry the tray." Thomas stirred and sat up, hair sticking out in all directions. "What is that smell?" he asked. Food, Eliza mumbled, still half asleep. I dreamed of bread. It is no dream, Bess said with a grin. Watching her children eat broke something inside Margaret. They devoured the porridge and bread with the single-minded focus of the truly hungry. She took only a little for herself, claiming she was not yet entirely ready for a full meal. You eat as well, Bess said firmly. You'll do those little ones no good by falling over in a faint on the floor. Margaret obeyed, surprised to find that her own hunger soon matched theirs. When the tray was nearly empty, there was a knock at the door. Bess opened it. Mr. Atkins stood there, hands clasped neatly before him. Mrs. Collins, he said, His Highness requests the honour of your company at breakfast in the small blue parlour. Margaret froze. I have already eaten, she said. Atkins's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. I believe he expected that, he replied. He wishes to speak with you. Only a few minutes, he said, while the household settles. The children may remain here, or Bess can take them down to the kitchen. There is no need for them to be on ceremony. Eliza looked alarmed at the idea of leaving her mother. Thomas's eyes shone with excitement. A real parlour, Mama, he whispered. And the prince. Margaret's mind raced. I cannot go like this, she said. I have nothing fit to wear. Bess stepped in quickly. I took the liberty of fetching a gown from the guest stores last night, she said. It is a little older in fashion, but sound and decent. With your leave, Mr. Atkins. He nodded. His Highness told us to provide whatever was necessary. Bess went to the chair and lifted the gown. It was plain compared to the finery of a true lady of fashion, but to Margaret it looked almost extravagant. Soft brown wool with simple embroidery along the cuffs. You'll do very well in this, Bess said, her tone matter-of-fact. No one will laugh, and if they do, they will have to answer to me. She winked. Margaret almost smiled in spite of herself. I will come, she said to Atkins. Give me a few minutes to dress. He bowed. I shall return to escort you. When he had gone, Bess set to work with brisk efficiency. In a short time, Margaret's hair was brushed and pinned. The borrowed gown settled over her stays, the worst creases smoothed. There, Bess said, stepping back. If I did not know better, I would take you for one of the genteel guests come for the Christmas season. Margaret looked into the small mirror. A pale woman gazed back, but not the half-frozen, bedraggled figure from the night before. Her features were fine, her eyes large. The gown suited her more than she would have believed. Remember, Bess added, you have as much right to stand under this roof as any other soul here. The prince brought you. That is enough. Margaret drew a breath. Thank you. She kissed the children and left them with Bess, then followed Atkins through the corridors. The castle felt different by daylight. Servants moved briskly, voices echoed. Somewhere someone laughed. He stopped at a door on the ground floor and opened it. Mrs. Collins, he announced. The small blue parlour was not small at all, though perhaps it was in comparison to the great hall. A fire burned in the grate. A round table near the window held a silver pot, cups and a platter of toast. Prince Edward stood by the fireplace, one arm resting on the mantel. He turned as she entered. Mrs. Collins, he said. Good morning. I trust you slept? Yes, Your Highness, she replied, dipping into a curtsy. Too well, I fear. I feel as if I have been asleep for a year. I imagine you have not slept comfortably for some time, he said. Please, sit. He gestured toward a chair. She sat on the edge, hands folded. You are looking better, he continued. Less like a snow statue. That is an improvement. She allowed herself a small smile. I am grateful for all you have done. He poured tea and handed her a cup. We will call yesterday's events a simple matter of human decency, he said. No more praise is needed or wanted. Milk, sugar, a little milk, thank you. He complied, then settled opposite her. I asked to see you, he said, because I wished first to assure you that you are welcome here for as long as is needed to make other arrangements, and second, to ask what those arrangements might be. I do not understand, she said. You spoke of an acquaintance who had written of a position, he reminded her. If I am to help, I must know what shape your future is meant to take. She tightened her fingers around the cup. It is nothing grand, she said. A woman I knew as a girl married an innkeeper in a town some miles to the south. She wrote that they needed someone to help with the accounts and the linens. If she still holds to that offer, I might earn enough to feed my children. And if she does not? He asked. Then I shall find something else, she said. I can sew, I can keep a house, I can read and write. We shall not starve, Your Highness. Not if I can move my hands. His brows rose slightly. You read and write? He repeated. Yes, she answered, surprised. I was taught as a girl. My husband wished me to assist him with some of his papers. You surprise me again, he said. You would make a better secretary than some men I know at court. She shook her head. Those men at court are not widows with 2 children and no name. On the contrary, he said, some of them might be improved if they were. Against her will, a short laugh escaped her. It was quickly smothered. I do not wish to be a burden, she said. If we may remain until the roads are safe and perhaps for a day or 2 more while I write to my acquaintance, that is more than enough. I have already ordered that a letter be sent to your friend in this town you mentioned, he said. Bess coaxed the direction from you last night, I believe. It will go with the morning post. In the meantime, there is no need to speak of leaving. She stared at him. You are very generous, Your Highness. I am practical, he replied. It would be absurd to throw a woman and 2 children back into uncertainty when the house has more rooms than it knows what to do with. A soft knock interrupted them. Atkins opened the door a little. Your Highness, he said, Lord Simon Hawthorne has arrived from town. He begs a word when it is convenient. Edward sighed. My cousin, he explained to Margaret. Convenient is never his concern, only what suits his own schedule. Show him into the library, Atkins. I shall come shortly. When Atkins had withdrawn, he rose. Forgive me, he said. Duty demands my attention. Will you be comfortable here a while? Yes, Your Highness, she said, rising too. I should not keep you. You keep me from nothing I would not gladly avoid, he said dryly. But I suppose I must hear what news London has vomited into his eager ears. She hesitated. Your cousin will not be pleased to find strangers here, I think, she said. That is my concern, not yours, he replied. You are under my protection, Mrs. Collins. Whatever gossip may flutter through these halls, remember that. He gave her a brief, reassuring nod and left the room. She sat again, alone with her thoughts and the sound of the fire. For a few moments, she allowed herself to enjoy the warmth, the faint clink of china, the sensation of safety. Then the door opened once more. A woman entered without waiting to be announced. She was tall and elegantly dressed, her dark hair arranged in a smooth, shining coil. Her eyes swept the room and came to rest on Margaret. Oh, the lady said, I had thought His Highness was here. I see I was mistaken. Margaret rose at once. I believe he has gone to the library, she said. He was called to meet Lord Simon. Of course he was, the lady replied. She stepped further into the room. And you are Mrs. Collins, Margaret said quietly. Mrs. Collins, the lady repeated as if tasting the name. I am Lady Beatrice Fairfax. My father is the Earl of Marwood. I am staying at Windermere as a guest of the family. Margaret curtsied. How do you do, Lady Beatrice? Lady Beatrice's gaze ran over her borrowed gown, her simple hairstyle, the hands that still bore faint roughness from hard work. Atkins told me that His Highness brought company from the road, she said. I admit I did not expect to find that company seated in the blue parlour. I was invited to breakfast, Margaret answered, keeping her tone even. Invited, Lady Beatrice murmured. How very thoughtful of him. She moved toward the window, looking out at the white fields. The storm has been unkind this year, she said. So many poor souls affected. You must have suffered greatly. From where did you come? A small village to the north, Margaret said. We lived there for some years. I was born farther south. And your husband? Lady Beatrice's voice was smooth. He is dead, my lady. How very inconvenient for you, Lady Beatrice said, then caught herself and smiled as if to soften the words. Forgive me. I did not mean to sound unfeeling. It must be very difficult travelling alone with children. Yes, Margaret replied simply. Lady Beatrice turned back to her. I am sure His Highness meant only to be charitable, she said. He has an unfortunate habit of acting with his heart rather than his head. He saved my children, Margaret said quietly. For that, I can only be grateful. I suppose one cannot blame him for that, Lady Beatrice conceded. Children do have a way of touching even the most guarded of hearts. She moved closer, her smile fixed. Tell me, Mrs. Collins, she said, How long do you expect to stay at Windermere? As long as His Highness permits, Margaret said. And no longer. Lady Beatrice replied. Then perhaps for all our sakes he will not permit over long. There was no malice in her tone, only mild impatience, as if she spoke of an unwelcome shower during a picnic. Before Margaret could reply, a figure appeared in the doorway. Beatrice, the new arrival said, you have ambushed the poor woman already. You might give her time to breathe. He was a man in his 30s with the same dark hair as the prince, though his features were sharper, his mouth thinner. His eyes, however, held a spark of humour. Lord Simon, Lady Beatrice said, you know I only seek to protect His Highness's interests. From the dreadful danger of gratitude, Simon returned lightly. He stepped into the room and bowed to Margaret. Lord Simon Hawthorne, at your service, Mrs. Collins, she supplied. Margaret Collins. He straightened slowly. Something flickered in his expression. Collins, he repeated. How interesting. Lady Beatrice's head turned. You know the name, Simon, she asked. Who in London does not, he replied. Though perhaps Mrs. Collins would prefer that we did not recall why. Margaret's spine went cold. I do not understand, she said. Oh, I think you do, he answered, still in that conversational tone. Collins, once of the Treasury Office, accused of certain irregularities. There were hearings, inquiries, whispers in every corridor. A most unpleasant business. Lady Beatrice's eyes widened a fraction. Surely this is not the same family, she said. There cannot be so many Collinses who fell from comfort into poverty in so short a span, Simon replied. He studied Margaret. You were the wife, I presume. The room felt suddenly smaller. My husband's affairs were his own, Margaret said. I wish to speak of them no more. Of course, Simon said smoothly. We are not in a court here. Only a house that values its reputation. Simon, Lady Beatrice murmured in warning. He smiled, but his eyes did not soften. We must be cautious, he said. Bringing strangers into Windermere might be generous, but when those strangers bear names that recall scandal, well, we may find that Mrs. Collins's presence at Windermere stirs up old, unpleasant stories. The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret felt them settle on her skin. Old, unpleasant stories. She had lived inside those stories for a year. Now they had followed her even here. I had not thought my name so widely known, she said. Oh, you must not flatter yourself, Simon replied lightly. It was the circumstances, not the person, that attracted attention. A clerk accused of mishandling funds in a government office, papers gone astray, numbers that did not match. You remember the gossip, Beatrice? Vaguely, Lady Beatrice said. I recall that there was some confusion, but such matters are beyond me. The confusion, Simon said, ended with one man dead and several others relieved, that the whole affair had been neatly contained. Margaret's hand tightened on the back of her chair. My husband was not a thief, she said quietly. He made mistakes under pressure. Others took advantage. It killed him. I will not have his name repeated like a tale at supper. Simon's brows rose, but he inclined his head. As you wish, he said. I meant no offence. That is not strictly true, Lady Beatrice observed. He smiled faintly. Perhaps not, but I mean none now. The sound of footsteps in the corridor spared Margaret from replying. Edward entered the room, the faint flush in his face suggesting that his conversation in the library had not been entirely pleasant. Simon, he said, you have found your way to the Blue Parlour already. I see you have met Mrs. Collins. We have been introduced, Simon replied. I could hardly miss the opportunity, given the interest her name once generated in London. Edward's gaze sharpened. Her name is of no concern to you, he said. She is my guest. That should be enough. Of course, Simon said easily. I am only anxious that you not expose yourself to unnecessary difficulties, cousin. The world is too fond of talking about you as it is. Edward's jaw clenched. The world may talk about what it likes, he said. I will not allow it to dictate whom I help when I find them half frozen on my doorstep. Margaret stepped back slightly. Your Highness, she said, perhaps I should return to my room. I did not mean to cause discord. You have not, he said immediately. If there is discord, it is of older origin. Simon spread his hands. I have no wish to quarrel, he said. I am only reminding you that every action you take is watched. When you appear to take an interest in a lady whose past is clouded, people will draw conclusions. Edward's eyes flashed. My interest is in her welfare, he said. If anyone chooses to see more in it, that is their own folly. Lady Beatrice's gaze moved between them, thoughtful. Perhaps we might let the matter rest for now, she said smoothly. We have guests arriving for the season. There will be more than enough for the house to discuss. Yes, Edward said. Let us, Mrs. Collins will remain at Windermere until I say otherwise. That is the end of it. He turned to Margaret, his voice softening. If you prefer solitude, you may always return to your room, he said. But you are also free to walk in the halls, in the grounds when the weather allows, to take the air in the gallery. This house is not a prison. Thank you, she said. I will trouble you as little as possible. You are not a trouble, he said. His tone was firm enough that even Simon did not answer. The days that followed settled into a strange pattern. Margaret discovered that life in a great house ran on its own rhythm. Bells rang, footmen hurried, fires were lit and tended, meals appeared and vanished, people came and went. She and the children occupied a small corner of it, sheltered but visible. The first morning she ventured beyond her room alone. She did so with caution. Bess had encouraged her. You cannot stay shut away forever, the maid said. If you do, they will say you are ashamed. Walk as if you belong, ma'am. That will confuse them. I do not belong, Margaret replied. Perhaps not, Bess said, but they do not need to know that. Margaret went. She chose the portrait gallery because Bess had said it was often empty during the day. The long room smelled faintly of polish. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching the gilt frames. She paced slowly, pretending to examine the painted faces. Her thoughts wandered. She heard footsteps behind her and stiffened. Mrs. Collins. She turned. A man she had not yet met stood near the door. He wore the livery of a senior servant. Yes, she said. I hope I am not intruding. Not at all, he replied. I am Mr. Kelly, the butler. Mr. Atkins mentioned that you might need directions at times. If there is anywhere you wish to go, you have only to ask. Thank you, she said. I was only walking. He looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. The household is adjusting, he said carefully. We are not accustomed to unexpected guests of your situation, but His Highness's word is law here. I have no wish to disturb established order, she said. I know what houses like this require. You do? He asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. I grew up in one not entirely unlike this, she said. Smaller, of course, less important. But the rules are the same. The wrong guest at the wrong time can upset everything. He nodded slowly. Then you understand why some are uneasy, he said. But you also understand that nothing truly serious can happen to you here while you are under His Highness's protection. Yes, she said. I understand. He inclined his head and withdrew. Rumours worked more quickly than footsteps. By the second day, the servants below stairs had a dozen versions of Margaret's history. In one, she had been the daughter of a wealthy merchant who had run away with a clerk. In another, she had betrayed her husband and caused his disgrace. In yet another, she was entirely innocent, and her husband had been ruined by corrupt superiors. Bess heard them all. They talk nonsense, she told Margaret frankly, but they would talk whether you were here or not. At least this way their tongues are exercised on something that matters. It does not matter, Margaret said. Not to them. Only to me and my children. It matters if you let it, Bess replied. If you walk with your head high, some will think twice before they whisper where you can hear. It was easier advice to give than to follow. Margaret heard the whispers anyway, not always words. Sometimes it was the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, the quick sideways glances, the little smiles. Thomas noticed too. Why do they look at us like that? He asked one afternoon in the corridor. How? She said. As if we are something strange, he said. Like the fair's dancing bear. We are strange to them, she answered. They are used to people who wear fine clothes and know which spoon to take at supper. We are different. Is different bad? He asked. No, she said. Not always. Sometimes, though, it hurt. A few days later, the house filled further. Guests arrived for the season, bringing more fine coats, more laughter, more talk. Margaret tried to stay out of their way. She took the children to the west garden when the weather permitted, to a small sheltered corner where the wind did not cut quite so sharply and a few evergreen shrubs gave colour to the snow. It was there that the first real unkindness came. Thomas and Eliza were rolling snow into bumpy shapes, agreeing solemnly that this one was a man and that one a dog. Margaret sat on a bench, her borrowed cloak tight around her shoulders. Voices drifted across the garden. 2 ladies and a boy came into view. The boy, about Thomas's age, wore a warm coat and a bored expression. The ladies talked between themselves, paying him little attention. He noticed Thomas and Eliza at once. "What are you doing?" he demanded, marching closer. "Making a snow family," Eliza said, smiling. "This one is Mama." The boy snorted. "That cannot be your Mama," he said. "Your Mama is a charity case." Eliza's smile vanished. Thomas stepped in front of her. "She is our mother," he said. "You ought not to speak of her that way." The boy lifted his chin. "My nurse said the prince brought a poor widow from the road," he said. "She said it was very foolish. My father said it too." "That was unkind," Margaret said, rising. She had not intended to speak, but the words came out before she could stop them. The boy started, then looked her up and down. "Are you her?" he asked. "The widow?" "Yes," she said. "And you know very well that repeating unkind words is worse than hearing them." He scowled. "It is true," he said. "You are here because the prince felt sorry for you. Everyone says so." "Eliza, Thomas," Margaret said evenly. "We are going inside now." Thomas hesitated, eyes bright with anger. "Come," she repeated. He obeyed, but as they passed, the boy added under his breath, "My father says your own father was a cheat. That is why you have nothing." Thomas flinched as if struck. Eliza's hand tightened in Margaret's. "Inside," she said again, her voice lower. She did not trust herself to say anything more. They walked quickly back toward the house. As they reached the door, another figure stepped out. Edward. He stopped short when he saw their faces. "What has happened?" he asked. "Nothing of importance, Your Highness," Margaret said. "A childish quarrel in the garden. It is already over." Thomas spoke at the same time. "He said Papa was a cheat," he burst out. "He said that is why we are poor." Edward's expression changed. The easy kindness vanished, replaced by something sharper. "Who?" he asked. "A boy," Eliza whispered, "with a red scarf. He said his nurse told him." Edward glanced toward the garden. The boy was still there, dragging his boots through the snow, unaware that he was being watched. "I see," Edward said. "Please," Margaret said quickly, "do not make more of it. Children repeat what they hear. That is all. And what they heard came from adults who should know better," he replied. "I will speak with his parents." "That will only make them dislike us more," she said. "It may make them think before they open their mouths," he said. "Thomas, Eliza, will you excuse us for a moment? There is a footman in the hall who can bring you to the kitchen for a cake. Tell him I sent you." The mention of cake distracted Eliza at least. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. When they had gone inside, Edward looked at Margaret. "This is precisely what I feared," he said. "You should not have to endure it." "I have endured worse," she replied. "I can bear a child's words." "It is not only your feelings that are hurt," he said. "It is your son's memory of his father that I cannot allow." She swallowed. "His father was not guilty of what they say," she said. "Not in the way they mean, at least. He was careless. He trusted the wrong men. He signed what they placed before him. But he did not steal." "I believe you," Edward said at once. "You barely know me," she said. "And I know nothing at all of the people who accuse him," he replied. "Yet I am expected to take their word as truth because they have titles or positions. That seems no more sensible." She looked away, toward the bare branches of a nearby tree. "When the inquiry was held," she said slowly, "my husband was already ill. He could not defend himself. Those who might have spoken for him chose silence. It was easier. And I—" She broke off. "And you what?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "It does not matter now. He is gone. The world believes what it likes. I must live in it as best I can." "You should not have to do so alone," Edward said. "At least in this house you will not. You cannot silence every whisper," she said. "Perhaps not," he agreed. "But I can refuse to bow my head to them. That is something." That evening, at supper, Margaret did not appear in the main dining room. She ate in her chamber with the children, grateful for the quieter space. Edward, in his place at the head of the table, felt the absence. Lady Beatrice noticed. "Your guest is not joining us tonight," she asked lightly. "She is tired," he replied. "The journey took more from her than she wishes to admit. Or perhaps she has discovered that the eyes in this room are sharper than snow," Simon murmured. Edward set down his fork. "Simon," he said, "I must ask you to curb your wit where Mrs. Collins is concerned. She has suffered enough without adding your amusement to it." "I am not amused," Simon said. "I am uneasy. You protect her fiercely, and I begin to wonder why." "I protect her because I found her half dead on the road," Edward said. "If I had left her there, would you now approve of me more?" "I would at least understand you better," Simon replied. Beatrice intervened, sensing the tension. "We shall all grow weary of this topic," she said. "Tell us instead of your plans for Christmas, Your Highness. Will there be a ball?" "There will be some sort of gathering," Edward said. "What shape it takes, we shall see." The talk turned, but the undercurrent remained. Below stairs, the servants' hall buzzed. The incident in the garden had found its way there in distorted form. Some thought Margaret had scolded the boy for no reason. Others said he had been cruel to the little girl. Bess listened, eyes narrowing. "I heard it from Cook's own niece," one maid was saying. "She said the widow looked fit to cry. The boy only said what everyone knows." "What everyone thinks they know," Bess snapped. "There's a difference." "Why defend her?" another asked. "You have known her only days." "I have eyes," Bess said. "That is enough." The next morning, Margaret found herself summoned again, this time to a small sitting room near the library. When she arrived, Edward was there with Simon and Mr. Atkins. Papers lay on a table between them. "I did not mean to disturb your day," Edward said, rising, "but I thought it best to speak with you at once." "What has happened?" she asked. "Simon has made inquiries in London," Edward said. "He has obtained copies of certain documents from the old inquiry into your husband's affairs." Margaret's stomach twisted. "Why?" she asked, looking at Simon. "To protect my cousin," Simon said. "If he is to involve himself in your case, he should at least know the full measure of it. I have no desire to see him entangled in another man's disgrace." "My husband's disgrace is not a contagion," she said. "Any scandal can become one," Simon replied, "particularly when it touches the royal household." Edward gestured toward the papers. "I have not read them yet," he said. "I thought it proper that we do so together, if you consent." She looked at the folded sheets. They seemed harmless enough, but she knew they contained the worst days of her life reduced to ink and arithmetic. "If I refuse," she asked, "then I shall still read them," Simon said. "But you will not know what judgments we form." She drew a breath. "Very well," she said. "Read them." Edward reached for the topmost document. After a moment, he frowned. "These are summaries of the charges," he said. "Missing funds, altered figures, unsigned receipts, all assigned to Mr. James Collins of the Treasury Office." "Yes," Simon said, "exactly as I recalled." "Do they mention the names of his superiors?" Edward asked. "In passing," Simon said. "The inquiry was narrow. That was the point." Edward turned another page. "There is a note here," he said slowly. "It mentions that certain instructions were given verbally by a senior official whose name is obscured. The ink is smudged." "Convenient," Simon said. Margaret pressed her hands together to stop their shaking. "They never wrote his name," she said. "Not in any paper I saw. They said it would be improper." "Whose name?" Edward asked. "The man under whom my husband served," she said. "The one who told him to sign the vouchers. The one who vanished from the room when questions were asked." Simon watched her closely. "You know his name?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "But I was a clerk's wife. What was my word against his?" Edward's gaze held hers. "It matters to me," he said. Atkins shifted, uncomfortable. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "we must be cautious. If we speak against a man of rank—" "We are not at that point yet," Edward said. "For now, we are only trying to see clearly what happened." Simon tapped the stack of papers. "These are not all," he said. "There is more. Letters, notes, comments made by those who knew of the affair. Some may support her account, some may not." "And you have them?" Edward asked. "Not yet," Simon replied. "I requested copies of everything from a contact in London. He sent these first. The rest will arrive in a separate packet when the messenger completes his journey." "And when will that be?" Edward asked. Soon, Simon said. Very soon. 2 days later, as snow fell softly outside and the castle hummed with preparations for another evening of company, a rider came through the gates with a leather satchel strapped behind his saddle. He stamped the snow from his boots in the courtyard, handed the satchel to a waiting footman, and asked to see Lord Simon Hawthorne at once. The footman did not even bother to dust the snow from the satchel. He carried it straight through the corridors, his shoes leaving wet marks on the stone. "Lord Simon," he said breathlessly when he reached the anteroom. "A packet from London, sir. Urgent," the rider said. Simon took the satchel, his eyes brightening a little. "At last," he murmured. "Thank you. See that the man is fed and warmed." He did not wait for an answer. He went directly to the library. Edward was there, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He turned at the sound of the door. "You look pleased," he said. "I am relieved," Simon replied. "The rest of the documents have arrived. We may now see more than the magistrate wished us to." Edward's gaze dropped to the satchel. "Then let us not waste time," he said. "Send for Mrs. Collins, please. I will not have this done without her." Simon hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "We do it properly." He handed the satchel to Atkins, who had followed him almost by instinct. "Ask Bess to fetch Mrs. Collins," Edward said. "Tell her I request her presence here." Atkins bowed and left. Simon loosened the ties on the satchel and drew out the bundle of papers inside. They were tied with a thin length of ribbon. "I confess," he said, "I am curious what we shall find. I have always had the sense that something sat uneasily beneath the surface of that affair." "You believed her guilty enough to warn me," Edward said. "I believed her unfortunate," Simon corrected. "Guilt and misfortune often share a table." "I wished you to know which chair she sat in." Edward said nothing. He watched the door. Margaret did not keep them waiting long. She entered with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if they were the only part of her she could control. "Your Highness," she said. "Lord Simon." "Mrs. Collins," Edward said. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." She sat on the edge of a chair near the table. "The rest of the documents have arrived," he told her. "Simon's man has obtained letters and notes from those who knew of your husband's case. I thought you should be present when we look at them." She looked at the bundle in Simon's hand and swallowed. "I am not sure I can bear to hear it all again," she said quietly. "Then you may leave at any time," Edward replied. "Nothing will be forced upon you." She drew in a slow breath and shook her head. "No," she said. "If there is finally to be truth, I will listen." Simon untied the ribbon. "The first," he said, "is a letter from a clerk in the same office. He wrote to a cousin about the inquiry." He unfolded the sheet and read, his voice even. "There is much talk here of Mr. Collins and the missing funds. Some say he kept them for himself. Others think he is merely foolish. Yet it is whispered that he did nothing without instructions from the Under-Secretary, who now walks with head high and claims ignorance. No one will speak against him, for he is well regarded and has powerful friends. Mr. Collins is ill and cannot defend himself. It is said that if he dies, the entire matter will be quietly forgotten, which would suit a great many people very well." Silence followed the words. Margaret's hands were white on the edge of the chair. "That Under-Secretary," Edward said. "What was his name?" Simon looked down at the letter again. "It is not written here," he said. "The clerk did not dare put it in ink. But I have another piece that may help." He picked up a smaller note. "This was found among the papers of a solicitor," he said. "He represented one of the other officials. It is not signed, but my contact believes it to be in the hand of the Under-Secretary himself. Listen, I am disappointed that Collins has not shown more backbone. A man entrusted with such matters ought to withstand a little heat. If he continues to fail in his health, we must ensure that the matter is laid firmly at his door before he is beyond censure. It would be most unfortunate if the public were to suspect that those higher up had been careless." Edward's face hardened. "Do we know who wrote that?" he asked. "Yes," Simon said quietly. "The Under-Secretary at that time was Sir Reginald Ashe." Margaret shut her eyes. The name was a weight she had carried for so long that hearing it spoken aloud made her feel oddly lightheaded. "You know the name," Edward said. "Yes," she whispered. "I heard it every day. They said it with admiration. Sir Reginald said jump and the office leapt. My husband trusted him. He believed that if Sir Reginald told him to sign, then all was well. And when suspicion fell, Edward said, did Sir Reginald defend him? She opened her eyes. No, she said. He said my husband had misunderstood, that any verbal instruction had been a simple suggestion. He shook his head and spoke of how sorry he was. He visited our house once while the inquiry was happening. He told me there was no point in fighting. He said if we accepted some blame, the matter would pass more quietly. And you believed him? Simon asked. No, she said. But my husband did. He was too ill to think clearly. He was frightened. He thought if he admitted to being careless, they would be merciful. They were not, Edward said. No, she agreed. Simon turned to another paper. This, he said, is from a memorandum kept by one of the inquiry clerks. It seems he liked to write his private thoughts in the margins. He notes that Sir Reginald pressed for a swift resolution, insisting that the department could not withstand prolonged scrutiny. He also writes, and I quote, "It is understood but not spoken that if we look too closely at Sir R, we may find that he has benefited from the chaos. Yet those above him see no advantage in such an investigation. Mr. Collins is convenient. He is a small man, and he is already ill. It is easier to lay the whole matter at his door." Margaret let out a low, shaky breath. She stared at the document as if it were a ghost. "I begged him," she said softly. "I went to the office. I spoke to one of the men there. I said they must look higher. He looked at me as if I were mad. He said I should be grateful they were not seeking to imprison my husband." Edward's eyes were on her. "You never spoke Sir Reginald's name aloud in public?" he asked. "No," she said. "What would it have done? They would have laughed. Or worse, they would have punished James for my boldness." Simon looked down, his jaw tight. "There is more," he said, "but the pattern is clear. Sir Reginald protected himself. Those above him preferred to accept his version rather than admit that the department was poorly supervised. So they allowed your husband to bear the blame." Margaret's fingers dug into the wood of the chair. "He bore it," she said, "and it crushed him." Edward folded his arms. "This," he said slowly, "is an injustice." Simon's lips tightened. "It is an old injustice," he said. "The men who made those choices are either retired or beyond reach. Sir Reginald himself is no longer in office." Edward looked at him. "Is he dead?" he asked. "No," Simon said. "Very much alive, living comfortably in the country, writing letters to the papers about the importance of integrity in public office." Margaret gave a short, choked sound. "Of course," she said. "We cannot drag him into a public scandal without evidence stronger than gossip and marginal notes," Simon said. "The Crown cannot be seen to overturn an old inquiry simply because the Prince has taken pity on a widow." "I am not speaking of public scandal," Edward answered. "I am speaking of what we acknowledge in this house. We have enough here to know that Mrs. Collins was not the wife of a deliberate thief. Her husband was careless, perhaps weak, but he was not alone to blame, and he was used as a shield." Margaret looked at him, startled. "You believe that?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Do you think I would sit in comfort while a woman I have invited under my roof is silently condemned by a story that is not the whole truth?" She shook her head slowly. "I do not know what princes do," she said. "I have only ever seen them from far away." "Then let me show you," he replied. "In this house, at least, we will speak of James Collins as a man who was wronged. We will not honor his mistakes, but we will not pretend he alone built the ruin that fell on his family." Simon drew in a breath. "That may not satisfy you," he said, "but it is more than most widows receive." "It is enough," Margaret said quietly. "More than I dared to hope." She rose. "Thank you for allowing me to hear it," she said. "If there is nothing more, I should go to my children." "Wait," Edward said gently. "There is something else I must ask." She paused. "What more could there be?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "When the inquiry was happening," he said, "you knew Sir Reginald's part in it. You could have spoken his name even if no one believed you. Yet you remained silent. Why?" She stared at him, then at Simon, then back. "Do you truly wish to know?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "Not as a prince. As a man who hopes to understand you." Her throat moved. "Sir Reginald hinted," she said slowly, "that if I kept quiet, if I did not cause trouble, he might see that some small allowance was made. Something to keep us from the very worst. I did not trust him, but I clung to the hope. I thought of my children. I thought if I shouted his name in the street, he would turn all his power against us, and we would be utterly ruined. Perhaps it was cowardice. Perhaps it was wisdom. I still do not know. Simon's voice was softer now. And did that allowance come? He asked. No, she said. Not a farthing. After my husband died, they forgot us. We sold everything. We left town. We were alone. Edward's hands curled into fists at his sides. You carried the weight of that choice all this time, he said. Yes, she replied. If I had spoken, perhaps nothing would have changed. Perhaps it would have made everything worse. But I will never truly know. That uncertainty is mine to bear. Not Sir Reginald's, not the inquiries. Mine. He crossed the room slowly, stopping a few steps away from her. You bore it, he said, and you still stand. That is not cowardice. She laughed softly, without humor. I stood because two small hands pulled at my skirts, she said. They did not allow me to fall. He studied her face. And now, he asked, now that the truth has been laid bare, at least in this room, what will you do with it? She looked at the papers, then at him. Nothing, she said. I cannot battle men like Sir Reginald. I have no strength left for courts and whispering corridors. I wish only to live quietly and see my children grow without shame. Edward nodded slowly. Then we shall see to that, he said. Simon, will you help me? Simon blinked. How? He asked. You have contacts in London, Edward said. You can ensure that, in the right circles, it becomes understood that James Collins was not the sole villain of that old tale. You can speak this new version of the story in the ears that matter. Simon hesitated. It will offend some, he said. Sir Reginald has friends still. Then let them be offended, Edward said. They deserve to be. Simon was silent for a time. At least, he said at last, I can make it known that there was more complexity than the official record showed, that the man's health was poor, that he was under pressure from above. That might soften some tongues. It will not erase the past, Margaret said. No, Simon agreed, but it might ease the future. She bowed her head slightly. Thank you, she said. I did not expect any of this when I set out on that road. Neither did I, Edward said quietly. Simon gathered the papers. I will speak with my contact this evening, he said. A few well-placed phrases in the right letter can travel surprisingly far. He left the room with Atkins, leaving Margaret and Edward alone. For a moment neither spoke. The fire crackled softly. You must think me very foolish, Margaret said at last, to have hidden so much, to have allowed you to take me into your house without knowing the full truth. I think you have been afraid for so long that fear has become habit, he replied. It is not easily unlearned. She turned toward the window. You have done more for me in a week than anyone did in the last year, she said. It is difficult to accept. You need not accept it as a debt, he said. I have reasons of my own. She frowned. What reasons? She asked. He did not answer at once. He walked to the window, then back, as if searching for the right words. When I first saw you, he said, I saw only a woman in danger and two children who might die if I drove past. That was simple. Any man with a conscience would have stopped. She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, please, he said. In the days since I have seen more. I have seen a woman who stands in the midst of gossip and refuses to bend her head. I have seen a mother who would endure any humiliation rather than have her children hear one more cruel word. I have seen patience where there could have been bitterness, dignity where there could have been pleading. Her lips parted, surprised. You do not know what I was like before, she said. I may have been foolish then, vain, complacent. All of that was stripped away. Perhaps, he said, but what remains is remarkable. She shook her head. You exaggerate, she whispered. I do not, he replied. I have known ladies with perfect pedigrees who trembled at the thought of a wrinkled gown. You walked into a prince's house with nothing, and you have never once begged me for anything. Even now, when I speak of clearing your husband's name, you ask only for quiet. Quiet is all I desire, she said. That may be, he said, but I will be honest with you, Margaret. It is no longer all I desire. Her heart gave a sudden, painful jolt at the sound of her name spoken that way. Your Highness, she said quickly, please, you must not say things you will regret. You have responsibilities. People expect. They expect me to marry a lady of rank and fortune, he said, to strengthen alliances, to host dinners where everyone is bored and no one speaks honestly. I know their expectations very well. And you should fulfill them, she said. I am not mocking you. Your duty is real. My duty is to the realm, he said, to govern wisely when the time comes, to show compassion to my people, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is not my duty to live my entire life according to the gossip of drawing rooms. You cannot cast that world aside, she said. I do not intend to, he replied, but I can choose how to live within it. She shook her head, bewildered. I do not understand what you are saying, she said. He stepped closer, not so close as to alarm her, but close enough that she could see the seriousness in his expression. I am saying, he said quietly, that in these days watching you, speaking with you, hearing you, I have found myself drawn to you, deeply, in a way I did not expect and did not seek. I think of you when you are not in the room. I listen for the sound of your children's footsteps. I find myself wanting to see you safe, not only this week, but always. She stared at him. This is gratitude, she said. Pity, perhaps. No, he said. Gratitude is what I felt when you thanked me for a warm carriage. Pity is what I felt when I saw you in the snow. This is something else. Do not name it, she whispered. Please. If I do not, he said, you will go on believing that you are only a guest to whom I owe a favor, and you will leave when the roads are clear. Is that what you want? Her lips trembled. It is what is best for you, she said. Do you always decide what is best for others? He asked gently. I have to, she replied, where my children are concerned. And where I am concerned? He asked. She looked away. You are a prince, she said. I am a widow with nothing. The world would not accept. Do you care so much what the world accepts? He interrupted. Yes, she answered, turning back to him, because the world can hurt you. It can hurt Thomas and Eliza. It can take what little peace we have found and make it taste bitter. I will not allow them to become targets for whispers for the rest of their lives. He was quiet for a moment. You think I do not know what it is to be whispered about, he said. Every choice I make is commented upon. Every step is watched. If I marry some earl's daughter whom I do not love, they will say it is a sensible alliance. If I choose a woman of no rank whom I do love, they will say I am foolish. Either way, they will talk. I cannot live my life by their tongues. Her breath came short. You spoke of duty, she said, of the realm. Would such a choice not weaken your position? It might complicate it, he admitted, but strength does not always come from doing what is expected. Sometimes it comes from standing firm when everyone else bends. She closed her eyes for a moment. You speak as if you have already decided, she said. I have, he replied, at least in my heart. I do not ask you for an answer now. I know you are still shaking from all that has been revealed. I know you must think first of your children. I honor that. But I must be honest with you. I intend, if you can ever trust me enough, to ask for your hand, not as charity, not as gratitude, as a man who loves you. The room seemed very quiet. Love, she whispered. The word sounded almost foreign. Yes, he said simply. I love your courage. I love the way you speak to me as if I am a man and not always a prince. I love the way you hold your children, as if they are the only true riches left in the world. I love that when you were offered the chance to cast blame on Sir Reginald to save yourself, your first thought was whether it would bring more trouble down on others. That is love, and I cannot help but answer it. Tears filled her eyes. She turned away, wiping them quickly. You place me in an impossible position, she said thickly. If I say no, I insult you. If I say yes, I risk everything. You risk much either way, he said gently. There is no path left to you that is entirely free of risk. That is not your fault. It is the world's. But you do not have to choose today. Only, do not run from the possibility because you think yourself unworthy. I do not think I am unworthy, she said fiercely. I think the world is unkind. He smiled slightly. On that, he said, we agree completely. She gave a wet, shaky laugh, in spite of everything. I need time, she said. I need to think. I need to speak with my children in ways they can understand. Of course, he said, take all the time you require. I will not press you. And while you think, know this. Whatever you decide, My regard for you will not turn to coldness. You will always have a place here if you wish it. You will not be cast out for declining a prince." She looked at him, searching his face. "I do not understand you," she said, "but I begin to believe you." "That is a start," he replied. A knock at the door made them both turn. "Your Highness?" Atkins's voice came through. "Lady Beatrice requests a moment of your time if you are at liberty." Edward glanced at Margaret. "Are you well enough to see her?" he asked. "Or would you prefer to avoid her for now?" "I am not afraid of her," Margaret said. "If she wishes to speak, let her speak." He nodded. "Come in," he called. Atkins opened the door. Beatrice entered, her expression composed. "I hope I am not interrupting," she said. "You are," Edward said mildly, "but perhaps it is a useful interruption." She looked between them, reading something in the air. "I heard that the rest of the papers had arrived," she said. "That you have been examining them." "We have," Edward said. "They show that Mrs. Collins's husband was not the sole architect of his ruin." "I suspected as much," Beatrice said quietly. "One could feel the imbalance even at the time." Margaret blinked. "You knew of it then?" she asked. "Only as anyone did," Beatrice said. "I am not part of that world of offices and ledgers, but I heard that a man was being used to shield another. I did not know names." She hesitated. "I came," she said, "to say that I spoke with the parents of the boy who insulted your children. I suggested that they teach him more carefully. They were defensive, but I persisted. They have agreed that he was wrong. They will ask him to apologize." Margaret was startled. "You did that?" she asked. "Yes," Beatrice said. "I cannot undo every unkindness you have suffered, Mrs. Collins, but I can prevent a few new ones, or at least try. I was ungracious when you arrived. I see now that clinging to my own expectations of what this house should be made me small." Margaret stared at her. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Then say nothing," Beatrice replied. "Only accept that not everyone here wishes you ill." She turned to Edward. "As for you," she said, "I have eyes. I see that your heart is engaged." He met her gaze calmly. "It is," he said. "I had hoped," she went on, "once that it might be engaged elsewhere, but I will not stand in the way of it now. I only ask that you are prepared for the storm that may follow." "I am," he said. "Very well," she said. "Then I release you." He smiled faintly. "You never held me," he said. "But I thank you anyway." Beatrice's lips curved. "Good," she said. "I prefer honesty." She looked back at Margaret. "If you choose to stay," she said, "you will find that the walls of this life are narrower than they appear from the outside. But within them, there can still be warmth. Do not refuse it entirely out of fear." Margaret nodded slowly. "I will remember," she said. Beatrice inclined her head and left. When the door closed, Edward exhaled. "That could have been much worse," he said. "You have strange friends," Margaret murmured. "They are becoming stranger by the day," he replied. She moved toward the door. "I must go to Thomas and Eliza," she said. "They will wonder what has kept me." He stepped aside. "Go," he said. "Think. Speak with them. Whatever you decide, we will face it together." She paused with her hand on the handle and looked back at him. "For the first time in a long while," she said softly, "I do not feel as if I am standing alone against the wind." His eyes warmed. "Then some good has already come of that night," he said. She opened the door and slipped out, her heart full of fear and something dazzlingly close to hope. Winter began to soften. It happened in small ways at first. The snow on the stone walls slipped down in uneven ribbons. Icicles shrank. The air, still cold, lost its sharp edge. When Margaret opened the window in the mornings, she could smell earth beneath the frost. Days passed after Edward's confession. He did not press her. He greeted her when they met in the corridors, spoke with the children in the evenings, and left space between them that was almost tender in itself. Margaret carried his words with her. She felt them when she brushed Eliza's hair. She heard them when Thomas laughed. She weighed them every night when she lay awake, staring at the beams over her bed. Bess noticed the change in her. "You walk as if you are listening for something," the maid remarked one morning. "Perhaps I am," Margaret said. "To what?" Bess asked. "To my own thoughts," she replied. "They have grown very loud." It was not only her thoughts that had shifted. The house itself had changed. The boy in the red scarf came to them in the garden one afternoon, cheeks flushed, hands shoved into his pockets. "My mother said I behaved badly," he muttered, staring at his boots. "She said I must apologize. So I am sorry. About what I said. About your father." Thomas watched him carefully. "Do you mean it?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "I do not know about your father," he said. "I only know what my nurse said. But you looked as if I had kicked you. I did not like that. So, yes, I mean it." "I am sorry." Thomas considered, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "We can be even." "Do you still have the snow dog?" Eliza asked. "It melted," the boy said. "We could make another." Eliza grinned. "I will help," she said. Margaret watched them start to roll snow together, their earlier quarrel already dissolving in the simple work of shaping a new, lopsided animal. Lady Beatrice was kinder too. She did not become warm overnight, but she softened. She joined Margaret twice in the small sitting room, speaking quietly of small things. Once she even laughed at a story about Thomas's attempts to play the pianoforte. "You see," Beatrice said to Edward later, "the world does not end because you place someone unexpected under your roof." "I never thought it would," he replied, "but I am glad you see it too." As for Simon, he disappeared into his letters. He wrote long into the night, sending careful phrases off to London. "Word is moving," he told Edward one evening. "It will not be a grand announcement, no trumpet. But the story is changing in certain circles. Your widow will not be spoken of quite so carelessly now." "She is not my widow," Edward said automatically. Simon gave him a look. "Is she not?" he asked. Edward did not answer. A week later, Margaret sat with Thomas and Eliza by the fire in their chamber. The children were playing a game that involved lining up buttons to represent an army and a village. Eliza's village was always saving Thomas's army with bowls of imaginary soup. "Do princes marry?" Eliza asked suddenly, placing a button carefully. "Yes," Margaret said. "They do." "Who?" Eliza persisted. "Do they marry princesses?" "Sometimes," Margaret said. "Sometimes they marry other ladies. It depends." "Who will Prince Edward marry?" Eliza asked. Margaret's heart stumbled. "That is not for us to know," she said. "Not yet." Thomas looked up from the line of buttons. "He likes you," he said matter-of-factly. "Thomas," she murmured. "It is true," he said. "He looks at you differently from the way he looks at other people, and he listens to you, even when you say things he does not like." "That only means he is courteous," she said. "No," Thomas insisted. "It is more." Eliza crawled into her lap. "If he asked you to stay, Mama," she said, "would you?" Margaret looked down at her daughter's small, earnest face. The firelight made Eliza's eyes glow. "Would you like to stay?" Margaret asked gently. Eliza nodded at once. "It is warm here," she said. "There is always bread, and you do not look so tired." Thomas hesitated. "I like it here," he admitted. "I like the library and the pianoforte, and I like when the prince lets me ask questions." He drew a breath. "But I do not want people to laugh at you." "They will not," Eliza said fiercely. "I will shout at them." "They may laugh whether we are here or not," Margaret said quietly. "People laugh at those who have fallen. It makes them feel safe." Thomas frowned. "Then I do not care what they think," he said. "I care what you think and what he thinks." "If he asked you to stay and you said yes, would that make you happy?" The word seemed enormous in his mouth. Margaret pulled them both close. "I do not remember happiness very well," she said softly, "but I think it might." "Then I want that," Thomas said. "For you." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I will talk with him," she said. "I promise you that. Whatever I decide, I will not decide alone." Outside, the days lengthened almost without being noticed. Servants began to talk of Twelfth Night, of small entertainments, of music. Windermere would not host a grand ball that year. The roads were still uncertain, and Edward refused to invite half of London, but he agreed to a smaller gathering for those who were already present. "It will cheer the house," Beatrice said. "You have been walking around with a thundercloud in your eyes. Let us have light instead. Music, candles, a little laughter." "I do not object to laughter," he said. "Only to foolishness." "You are very hard to please," she replied. "Fortunately, the rest of us are easier." News of the planned evening reached Margaret through Bess. There will be dancing in the great hall, Bess said. Nothing splendid, mind. Just enough to make the floorboards creak. His Highness says everyone in the house may attend if they wish. Including us? Margaret asked. Bess's eyes sparkled. He told me to put it in plain words, she said. He said, "Tell Mrs. Collins I expect her there." That is as clear as a summons. Margaret's stomach fluttered. I have no gown fit for such a thing, she said. This one has already suffered too many repairs. I thought of that, Bess said, and Lady Beatrice sent a message this morning. She wishes to lend you something. She said to tell you that it is entirely selfish. She does not want the evening to be dull, and you have a way of making rooms more interesting. Margaret stared at her. She said that? She asked. She did, Bess said. She is not as cold as she looks. Only careful. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. Very well, she said. I will go. The afternoon of the gathering, Lady Beatrice herself appeared at Margaret's door, carrying a gown over her arm. I come bearing peace and fabric, she said. May I come in? Yes, of course, Margaret said, flustered. Beatrice held up the dress. It is not new, she said. I wore it 2 seasons ago in town. The colour does not suit me as well now that I've grown paler, but I think it will do very well for you. Margaret lifted the fabric. It was a deep blue, simple in cut but elegant. This is far too fine for me, she said. Nonsense, Beatrice replied. It is short in the waist and narrow in the sleeves. I can no longer breathe in it without making a spectacle of myself. Better it adorn someone who can carry it with grace. I do not know how to thank you, Margaret said. By wearing it, Beatrice said briskly, and by not hiding in some corner all night. His Highness will be watching the door more than he should. It will annoy me if you do not appear. Margaret smiled, in spite of her nerves. I will come, she promised. When evening arrived, Windermere glowed. Candles burned in polished sconces. Musicians tuned their instruments in one corner of the hall. The guests, fewer than at a London ball but no less elegant, gathered in small groups, talking, laughing, adjusting gloves. Edward stood near the hearth with Simon. You look like a man about to face a firing squad, Simon remarked. I feel like a man about to do something that cannot be undone, Edward replied. That is what life is, Simon said. A series of things that cannot be undone. Try to choose them well. Helpful, Edward said dryly. Simon's mouth curved. Walk carefully, he said, but do not walk backwards. Edward glanced toward the entrance again. He tried not to, but his gaze returned, almost of its own will. Then he saw her. Margaret stepped into the hall with Thomas and Eliza at her sides. The gown Beatrice had given her fit as if it had been made for her. The deep blue set off the warm tone of her skin. Her hair was arranged more carefully than usual, but not stiffly. There was a flush in her cheeks that owed nothing to the cold. Conversation around them wavered. People turned. Some whispered. Some looked frankly curious. Margaret felt every glance. She kept her head level and her steps steady. Her fingers tightened lightly around Eliza's hand. Thomas cleared his throat. Everyone is staring, he muttered. Yes, she answered. Let them. Eliza squeezed back. I like your dress, she whispered. You look like a story. Edward crossed the hall to meet them. Mrs. Collins, he said, bowing slightly. Thomas. Eliza. I am very glad you came. You invited us, Margaret said. It would have been rude to refuse. I am glad your sense of courtesy is so strong, he replied. His eyes moved over her with open admiration. You are radiant tonight. She felt heat rise at the base of her throat. That is the work of Lady Beatrice and Bess, she said. I did very little. You walked into the room, he said. That is more than enough. He turned to the children. There is a corner set aside for a special supper for the youngest guests, he told them, with sweetmeats and lemonade. Would you like to see it? Yes, Eliza said instantly. Thomas hesitated, looking at his mother. Go, Margaret said softly. I will not be far. Stay together. Edward called a footman, gave brief instructions, and watched the children led to a small, bright corner where other boys and girls already sat. When he looked back at Margaret, the hall seemed to recede a little. May I ask you something? He said. Here? She asked. In front of all these people? I have grown weary of hiding what matters to me, he said quietly. But if you prefer privacy, I will wait. She took a breath. Ask, she said. If I faint, You may blame Beatrice's gown. He smiled. Not even I would dare, he said. He extended his hand. Will you dance with me? He asked. She stared at his hand. I have not danced in years, she said. Neither have I, he replied. We will be equally clumsy. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure. The musicians began to play, not a formal, complex set, but a simple country dance, softened for the hall. Couples moved into place. Margaret found herself facing Edward, then turning, then stepping in time almost without thinking. Do you know, he said softly as they moved, that I have been thinking for days of how to endure this evening? Endure, she echoed. I do not enjoy these gatherings, he said. Too much performance, too many eyes, but tonight I find that I do not mind them as much. What changed? She asked. You are here, he said. Her heart beat so hard she was certain he must feel it through her hand. You say such things very easily, she managed. Not easily, he said, but honestly. The dance carried them apart, and then back together. As they passed under the gaze of the assembled guests, some faces were curious, some disapproving, some quietly pleased. Beatrice watched with an expression that was almost a smile. Simon's eyes were sharp, but his nod was small and approving. When the dance ended, Edward did not release her hand. I have something to say, he murmured. Now? She whispered. Yes, he said. Now. He led her gently toward the hearth. The musicians fell silent by his signal. Conversations quieted. Edward turned, his voice carrying without effort. My friends, he said, you know me. You know that I am not fond of long speeches at entertainments. You would rather dance, and I would rather let you. But there is something I must speak, if I am to be at peace in my own house. The room hushed. When I traveled north some weeks ago, he continued, I found on the road a woman and 2 children in a snowstorm. I brought them here. Some thought it folly. Some thought it charity. Many of you have formed opinions. A faint stir ran through the hall. That woman, he said, turning slightly toward Margaret, has since shown more courage, more dignity, and more grace than I see in many who were born to comfort. She has faced whispers with her head high. She has placed the well-being of her children above her own pride at every turn. She has endured the consequences of an old injustice with more steadiness than I could claim in her place. He drew breath. I will not ask you to approve of what I confess next, he said. I will only ask you to hear it. I have come to love her, not out of pity, not out of gratitude, out of respect, and out of the simple, stubborn fact that my heart has attached itself where it pleases, regardless of my title. A murmur rose, then fell. I cannot change that, he said, nor do I wish to. And so I say to you now in this hall that I intend to ask for her hand. If she grants it, I will count myself blessed. If she refuses, I will count myself fortunate to have known her. But I will not pretend that she is a temporary guest whose presence means nothing. He turned fully to Margaret. I do not ask you for your answer in front of them, he said softly enough that only she could hear. That would be cruel. I say this here so that whatever you decide, it is clear that your worth is not a secret to me. Her eyes shone. Her throat worked. You have put my heart in my hands, she whispered. I do not know how I am to carry it. Let me help, he said. There was a moment of stillness. Then Beatrice began to clap. The sound was not loud at first, but it spread. Some joined more readily than others. A few did not clap at all, their faces tight, but the sound grew until it filled the hall. Margaret stood in the center of it, bewildered, moved, terrified, and oddly calm. Later, when the music resumed, she slipped away. The hall felt too crowded. She went to the small courtyard where she had once spoken with Edward, among the first green shoots. The air was cold, but not bitter. The sky was clear. Stars pricked its dark surface. She sat on the low stone bench, hands clasped. She did not wait long. Edward's footsteps were sure on the flagstones. He came through the archway and stopped a few paces away. You ran, he said gently. I walked very quickly, she replied. May I join you? He asked. Yes, she said. He sat beside her, leaving a small space between them. Their breath clouded the air. I did not mean to trap you, he said. If declaring my intention before them has made this harder, I am sorry. It has made it different, she said. But not harder. She turned to face him. "Thomas asked me days ago what I would do if you asked me to stay," she said. "He wanted to know if it would make me happy. I told him I did not remember happiness well, but that I thought perhaps it would." Edward's gaze was steady. "And what do you think now?" he asked. She looked at her hands. "I think I remember," she said slowly. "Not the silly happiness of trifles, the deeper kind, the kind that comes when fear loosens its grip, just a little." He did not speak. "You told me once that there is no path left to me without risk," she went on. "That is true. If I leave, I risk poverty, cold, uncertainty. If I stay, I risk gossip, resentment, the suffocating weight of expectation. Either way, the world will say something." She drew a breath. "I cannot choose a path for the sake of silence," she said. "Silence will not come, so I must choose for the sake of what I want." "And what do you want?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes. "You," she said simply. "I want you, not the prince, the man who stopped his carriage in the snow, the man who listens when I speak, the man who makes my children laugh. I do not know if I can always be brave, but I know that when I imagine the years ahead, they are lighter with you beside me." His hand moved almost involuntarily. He caught himself, then held it out slowly, giving her time to refuse. "Then let us face those years together," he said. "Margaret Collins, will you marry me?" Tears spilled over her lashes. She did not wipe them away. "Yes," she said. Her voice trembled, but the word did not. "Yes, Edward, I will." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh and almost like a sob. He closed the distance between them, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you," he murmured. "You are thanking me," she said, astonished. "For trusting me with your life," he said. "And with theirs." She smiled through her tears. "Do not make me regret it," she said. "I will spend my days trying not to," he replied. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a possessive kiss, nor a hurried one. It was gentle, certain, filled with all the words they had not yet learned to say. For a brief moment, the winter night vanished. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the steady strength of his hands, the knowledge that she was no longer standing alone. When they drew apart, they both breathed out clouds of mingled air. "We must tell the children," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "They will wish to know how soon they can begin to call me something even more troublesome than Your Highness." She laughed softly. "In that I will allow them some time," she said. The wedding was not grand by royal standards. There were no crowds in the street, no endless procession of carriages. It took place in the small chapel at Windermere, with only those who truly wished them well in attendance. Margaret wore a simple cream gown that Bess and another maid had altered from an older dress in the family stores. Her hair was arranged with a few white ribbons. She carried no bouquet. It was too early in the year for flowers. She carried instead Eliza's hand. Thomas walked beside Edward, trying very hard to appear solemn and grown, though his eyes sparkled. Simon stood near the front, his expression half serious, half amused. Beatrice took a place among the small cluster of guests, her chin lifted, her gaze clear. Edward waited at the altar. When Margaret entered, the chapel seemed to brighten. He watched her approach with a quiet awe that never left his face. The vows were spoken in simple words. "I take you," Edward said, "not in defiance of what the world expects, but in obedience to what I know to be right. You are my choice, my equal, my wife." "I take you," Margaret replied, "knowing that I bring you no fortune, no title, only my heart and my children. I give them into your care as I give you myself." "I accept them," he said, "all three." When the clergyman pronounced them husband and wife, there were no cheers from a crowd, only the soft murmur of those gathered, the small clap of Eliza's hands, the proud, quick wipe of Thomas's sleeve across his eyes. Edward kissed his bride there in the chapel. The kiss was brief and reverent, yet full of promise. Later, in the small reception that followed, Beatrice raised a glass. "To unexpected storms," she said, "and to the doors they sometimes open." Simon added, "To the prince who stopped his carriage, and to the lady who had the courage to step inside." Margaret looked at Edward. "If you had not spoken, I would have died in that snow," she said quietly. "If you had not trusted me, I would have driven on and spent the rest of my life wondering whom I had left behind," he replied. Spring came slowly to the north. Snow melted in uneven patches. Grass appeared, shy at first, then bolder. Trees budded. One afternoon, weeks after the wedding, Margaret stood at the window of their sitting room looking out at the fields. Edward joined her, carrying a book he had not been reading. "Thomas is in the stables," he said. "He is very earnest about learning to ride properly. He says a prince's son should not fall off a pony." "He is not your son by blood," she reminded him gently. "He is my son now," Edward said. "Blood is not the only way a bond is formed." "And Eliza?" she asked. "She is in the music room with Beatrice," he said. "They are arguing over who should play next. I believe Eliza is winning." Margaret smiled. "She will win often," she said. "She has a stubborn heart." "I know someone else like that," he replied. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. "Truly?" He was silent for a moment. "I regret that I did not pass that stretch of road sooner," he said. "I regret every night you spent in fear before I knew you. I regret that the world is not kinder. But no, Margaret, I do not regret this, not a single breath of it." She closed her eyes briefly, letting the truth of that sink into her bones. "Sometimes I still wake in the night," she said. "I think I am back on the road. I hear the wind. I feel the children shivering. Then I remember where I am." He tightened his arm around her. "When that happens," he said, "wake me. We will remember together. And then we will look at where we are now." She nodded. Below in the courtyard, a carriage waited to take Beatrice back to her father's house for a time. The lady stood by the door, speaking with Simon. They both looked up at the window at the same moment and lifted their hands in brief, friendly salute. "Do you think they will ever approve without reservation?" Margaret asked. "Some will," Edward said. "Some never will. But their approval is not the measure of our life." "What is?" she asked. He looked down at the fields, at the faint line of the road where snow had once nearly swallowed her. "Moments like this," he said. "Quiet, ordinary, full." She turned her face up to his. "Do you remember your first words to me?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I have replayed them often." "They sounded like an order," she said with a faint smile. "They were," he replied. "But the order was to save your life, and mine, though I did not know it then." She reached up, touching his cheek. "Say them again," she murmured. He laughed softly. "There is no snow," he said, "no storm, only this room." "Still," she said. "Say them." He held her gaze, his eyes warm, his voice low. "Get in the carriage," he said. She smiled, tears bright with joy this time, not sorrow. "I did," she whispered, "and it brought me home. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.